again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, your host today, and today, pretty straightforward, so let's get to it. What paranormal event have you experienced while walking or driving alone at night? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Back in November 2018, I'd say about 10 p.m., my husband, driving, and I were driving over a viaduct, probably going about 50 miles per hour. Traffic wasn't heavy, but there was definitely more than a few other cars all around. All of a sudden, there's this thing, inches in front, walking directly in front of me on the passenger side. I squeezed my eyes shut, thinking we were about to hit it, which should have happened the moment my eyes closed, but it didn't. I looked in the side mirror to see if it just stepped back, then looked at the driver's side, and I noticed my husband was sitting up and looking in the rearview mirror. I just sat kinda stunned, but I didn't say anything. He ended up saying something along the lines of, "What the F was, and did you see that?" When my husband saw it, it was directly in front of him. Then it was behind us, and the car that was behind us swerved to avoid whatever the F it was. I have no idea what it was. The closest description I can give is it looked like Huggy from the Labyrinth movie. It had gnarly looking facial features. All of its facial features were undoubtedly human in every way, but like bigger and thicker. No taller than 4 feet, brown skin. It had effing clothes on. I can't remember if it had hair, but its arms were extremely long. It was like hummingbird fast. Moved in a literal blink of an eye. This thing looked extremely confident, comfortable on 2 legs. Not driving, but in my car. The building I used to work in, when I would work late and be the last one there, when I would start my car and look in my mirror to back up, there would be an old man standing directly behind my car, staring at me in the mirror. I'd turn around to look behind me, and no one would be there. This happened so often that I eventually stopped looking behind me before backing out of the parking space. This actually happened today. I was driving on the highway when I saw a man with a black coat, blue jeans, and brown dress shoes walking on the side of the highway. It was pretty strange, anyways, because that's obviously dangerous, but it was also pouring rain. I didn't move my eyes off the guy, and then he disappeared in an instant. I looked back to see if he was there, and he wasn't. He disappeared before I passed him. I was so shocked, and I was freaking out, and still am. Not at night, but walking alone. I was 10 years old, and it was the early 90s. I lived in a very small, tiny, safe New Jersey town, and was often allowed to go for walks by myself for hours on end. One day I was walking back from the local library and was meandering through a cemetery. I had been gone maybe an hour or so when I glanced over at the headstone that had a statue of an angel on top. That's where it happened. I didn't actually hear a voice, but I kinda thought a thought that wasn't my own. My mind received a very clear message: run home now, run. Nothing like that had ever happened to me before, and I just bolted. I never ran so fast in my life, and I had no idea why I was even doing it. When I reached my house, I opened the front door and was greeted with billows of smoke. My father had started to cook something on the stove, forgot about it, and went upstairs to take a nap. He was sound asleep. The thing he was cooking in the frying pan was on fire, and if I had arrived any later, the kitchen, and then very quickly the house, would have been engulfed in flames. I had arrived at exactly the moment between the food catching fire and the house catching fire. You could not see or smell or sense smoke from the outside the house. It was entirely contained within the frying pan, but only for a couple seconds more. I quickly put on oven mitts, grabbed the lid, and smothered the fire. I turned off the stove and then ran upstairs, where I found my dad snoozing. I woke him up right away, told him everything, and he checked to make sure that everything was safely put out in the kitchen. There was absolutely no harm done to the house or to anybody living in it. If I had arrived moments later, people would have probably died, and the house would have definitely burned. Thank you to whomever it was that sent my mind that urgent message. Have you ever received some type of message like this from beyond your understanding? And what was the outcome? Not me, but a good friend of mine. He had tragically just seen his best friend drowned. His friend had gotten tangled in underwater cables and couldn't get free. It was horrible. My friend was sitting on the side of the lake waiting for the body to be recovered. Of course he felt like shit and was angry at the helicopters flying around. F you news helicopters, give people some space. A man came up and sat beside him, not saying much, just being there. He was dressed in a flannel shirt and jeans and told my friend his name was John. He was a comfort. After the funeral, and when life was getting back to a routine, we were all worried about my friend. He just felt so guilty and sad. Everyone kept urging him to go to therapy, but he resisted. He decided to rent a cabin in the woods on the other side of the state from the lake. He said just to get away, but admitted to me later that suicide was on his mind. Well, he went for a hike in the woods and rounded a bend, and there was John. Same flannel shirt and everything. Once again, he was very comforting, and they had a good long talk. My friend thanked him and started back to the cabin, and then turned around to ask John something, and he was just gone. Thankfully, obviously, my friend came home to tell the tale. Thank you, John. Well, okay, I wasn't the one driving. It was a friend or roommate. We had just gotten home from a restaurant. About a couple miles away from the restaurant is a road, and there's nothing but trees. So we're driving, and he stops the car. I asked him why he stopped, and he said, "That dude is crossing the street up ahead. I don't want to scare him." I looked up the road while he's looking at me. There's nobody there. So we start going again, and I hear a loud thump. So I look out the back window, and there's a dark figure about 4 yards behind us. The figure was maybe 7 feet tall, and all black except for a white streak going across the figure's chest. I asked if that person he saw. He said yes. So we just kept going, not even caring anymore. A few minutes go by, and we're in the city now. We're at a red light, and the figure is sitting on the sidewalk with a teddy bear in its hand. When we started going again, it just looked at us. When we got back to our apartment, we both go to bed. An hour or two goes by, and I wake up to the sound of my roommate screaming. He told me that the dark figure was staring at him through the window. We live on the 4th story of the building. Not entirely certain the event was of paranormal nature, but it sticks like a wedge in my memory. Driving home on a curvy back road with my best friend, we're chatting about whatever nonsense we'd been up to or what game was on our radar that weekend. Typical teenage shenanigans. We round a curve to see a man stepping out of the woods onto the edge of the road in a solid white suit holding an axe. We both stop talking as I swerve around him, sitting in silence for a solid 30 seconds. We cast a quick glance at one another and he says, "Are we going to talk about any of that?" To which I simply responded, "Nah, I don't need answers for that," and kept driving. Paid attention to local news for a few weeks to see if a murder had happened on that stretch, but nothing ever seemed to come of it. To this day, I can't grasp why anyone would be out along that road at 2 a.m., much less in a full suit. Saw what appeared to be an animal on the side of the highway that had been hit. Looking at it as I passed, it was laying with its back to the road and appeared to have a split on the back, like what happens when a muscly animal takes a heavy hit and the skin splits. Not an explosion like what happens when smaller agile animals get hit on the highway. And its fur was dark and matty, so you'd think bear, but the fur was too long, shaggy almost. Seeing this, all in a matter of seconds, I got off the next exit and looped back around as it was around 2 to 3 a.m. There's no traffic and I'm working. By the 10 minutes it took me to get back, it was gone. I'm convinced it was a baby squatch, and Mom dragged it off. I sure as hell wasn't getting out to investigate. So I'm not really superstitious, but I was driving through the holler in West Virginia late at night one time, and an injured dog darted out in front of me. He looked like a yellow lab with a broken hind leg. Assuming it had already been struck once, I stopped to check on it and see if it had an address on the collar. I get out of my car and look down the embankment. There's a deep ditch, a small strip of grass, and then a rocky drop into the river. The dog was nowhere to be seen. It was like it vanished into thin air. Thinking it ran off and hid like injured animals do, I got back in my car and left. I thought nothing of it until 6 months later while perusing YouTube. I came across a video, Most Haunted Roads in West Virginia, and clicked on it out of pure curiosity. Partway through, they start talking about an isolated stretch of highway in the Appalachian Mountains. They said there's a legend of a dog ghost that will appear in the middle of the road at night and try to lure unsuspecting travelers into the woods to get lost. At this point, I get full body chills. Then, they said the name of the route, and I nearly threw my computer across the room. Same road. I'm a little stitious now. I like that you can be skeptical, but still at this point, now not super, but a little stitious. Well done. I was driving back to the dorms after work while in my junior year of college when I began to fall asleep behind the wheel. I was averaging 4 hours of sleep a night due to classes and working multiple jobs. All of a sudden, I felt 5 fingers moving on the back of my head, as though someone in the back seat stuck their fingers in my hair and moved them up. Then I felt a tightening feel in the back of my head, and my head yanked up in time for me to get back in my lane before driving into a tree. I felt the fingers on my head just kind of gripping my head up for the rest of the drive. I seriously could only move my head to check my mirrors, but my head couldn't move down. Once I got back to campus, the fingers loosened and let me go, and I smelled cherry pipe tobacco in my car. I don't smoke, never had, and still to this day do not allow anyone to smoke in my car, but my favorite uncle or godfather, who passed away a month after I started college, smoked a pipe. Cherry tobacco was his favorite. I think he was in the car with me, keeping me from getting into an accident. Even though he's been gone 20 years, whenever I'm really sad or in some type of dangerous situation and I'm alone, I smell cherry pipe tobacco and instantly feel better, safe. One night I was driving my moped home from a place my boyfriend, now husband, was house sitting at the time. It was somewhere around 2 a.m. and town was dead. My drive happened to take me near our local town cemetery, which is locally regarded as haunted. A bit stereotypical, I know. I myself had only had scant experiences there at this point, and most of them positive, and never feared the place. But I'd never seen it or felt it outside the cemetery. As I'm stopped at the intersection directly next to the cemetery, I impatiently waited for my light to turn. As mopeds are light, they don't always trigger the sensor pads, and that was a problem I was having. So, despite me being the only person on the entire road in all directions, it wasn't changing. It was annoying. But I didn't mind it much, as I love to drive when it's empty like it was. As I waited, I caught a glimpse of movement behind me in my rearview mirror. In my mirror, I see what appears to be a semi-translucent decaying woman standing only like 4 feet behind me. You can guess I was more than just startled by this. I was out of there. I hit the throttle and made a right on red. I drove so hard in panic that when I hit a ditch and my moped turned off, I nearly ditched it and ran home. Thankfully though, I was able to get it started again and arrived home in record time. It didn't appear to follow me, and looking back, I didn't feel like it wanted to harm me, but who wouldn't jump if they were just enjoying a late night drive and suddenly saw that? I was stalked by a shadow of people all through town. I grew up in a very safe, amazing, tiny town that almost could be called a village. It was very pretty and pleasant at night, so I took a lot of night walks. The sidewalks through town were always well lit and the path itself was well maintained. One night on the path through the town center, I had turned around to look at the moon, and I saw the shadow of a person quickly move behind the edge of a building on the corner. We have had incidents of unfriendly folk in town before, but not for a long time, and no one was ever hurt, so I figured if I would pretended I didn't notice this person, they wouldn't feel threatened to act out or do something unpredictable. I kept walking, but with my head kinda turned, so I might see them in my peripheral vision. But after getting about 30 feet away, I figured they'd left, and I turned my focus in front of me again. Then I saw the same thing. The shadow of a person disappeared behind some bushes or shrubbery on the side of the road up ahead. At this point, I had two thoughts. 1. 2 people are planning to gang up on me, or 2. A ghost? I'm a little skeptical about the paranormal, so I went into survival mode and took a hard left to follow a dirt path down away from the town center and shortcut to halfway down the sidewalk back towards my house. The path is not well lit, so I ran through it to get back to the lit sidewalk as fast as possible. When I reached the bottom of the path, I ran across a small dirt parking lot in front of a small abandoned pizza parlor and onto the lit sidewalk. I turned around to see if I could see anyone, and by the short wall that bordered the midtown sidewalk and the dirt area, I just scrambled down and there were 2 figures. They were too dark. The moon was full. Everything was being backlit well enough that I could see details in the lamps and decor in the town center from where I was, probably 60 feet or so. But these human shapes had no detail, just black, solid silhouettes. It looked uncanny, and it unnerved me. I walked briskly back to my house, and when I got up to my porch, I turned around one last time, and they were standing at the end of my road about 25 feet away, still solid black and detailless. There is no way I walked all the way home with them close enough behind me to be that close to my house at this moment, and also have me not hear them walking. The sidewalk is well maintained, but it still has pebbles and sticks and stuff on it. It's almost impossible not to be heard, especially at night when it's quiet. I had seen them and immediately went inside, so I saw them for less than a second. I am still skeptical about what I saw. I gotta hope it were shadow people because the thought of two actual people following me at night freaks me out more. But that incident only happened once. Very weird stuff. So what would be more frightening to you? Would it be two actual people following you? Or two paranormal entities? I was 23 years old, working as a guard in a forest in Izmar. Name I forgot. I was drawing, yes, I love drawing animals, birds, and other animals until I noticed running sounds. I took my gun and my flashlight. An old ranger's flashlight was the kind of light that was produced and could actually aim a little more further than a normal flashlight. And when I pointed it towards the sound, I saw a strange creature, green long legs and arms, resembling a horizontal human standing. After catching the light, then it started running towards the forest, and I was scared to my place. I went in and locked the door and waited at that place until the sun rose. And yeah, others say it's just a bear or something like it. I know what I saw. The Grinch? As a child, I used to take the garbage out when my mom asked me to. This one evening was dark already. I ran down, and when I got to the container about to throw the garbage in, I noticed a red light around me. My first thought was that some kids are pointing their lasers at me. This was in the 90s when lasers were hit in Romania. But then I noticed the light is coming from above. I looked up. It was shining right on me, like I was in the center of a light cone. Light turned off, and what remained was a white dot. The next second it accelerated and in a swooshing manner disappeared behind the nearby forest's horizon. Also, my father said last week he woke up to get some water, looked out the window, and above the city center saw 3 dots. White dots just idling. Several minutes later they disappeared. It was a cloudy night, so it couldn't have been stars. I think I saw a ghost on Halloween a couple years ago. Very strange, especially as I had been talking to people at the party earlier about how the veil was thinner on the Samhain, plus this night was especially strong because it was a blue moon. Anyway, I was walking home by myself down unfamiliar streets and alleys. I turned down a long, deserted road with no side turnoffs. Just a long stretch straight. Up ahead, I saw a guy loitering on the sidewalk. I automatically crossed to the other side of the street. Wasn't scared, just a reflex. And I thought it a bit strange that he was just loitering where there was nothing around. As I got closer, I noticed he was smoking a cigarette. I saw the glowing tip. I glanced down at my phone to check my GPS, and when I glanced up, he had vanished. There was nowhere he could have gone. No driveways or alleys or turnoffs. Just vanished into thin air.